And he was able to give us his perspective yesterday on what it's like being a inmate. You know what I'm saying? Being somebody that's locked up, and you know what it was like for him experiencing the criminal justice system, at least from his angle. And of course, our guest today, he's gonna share basically parts of his experience and things of that nature. At least before our class finishes at 10:40. So. Apart from that, is there any current events or any news that y'all want to kind of just bring to the forefront, or that y'all want to, bring to light and maybe have like a brief little discussion on, or like anything in the news pertaining any cases or situations that you've noticed?
I saw that last June, this inmate, she was a trans female and they didn't put her with the rest of the cisgender females, but they put her in solitary and she ended up killing herself. And it now come to light, and I think it was in Rikers Island.
Uh,
Yes, I can't pronounce her name.
right. I think I heard about that case as well, where as you said, like basically there was a situation where a trans identifying person ended up taking their own life. Me, when I worked in Rikers, there's not really that much, unfortunately, a emphasis on, at least through my experience, hasn't been that much emphasis on the LGBTQ community. Of course, we know that, certain things in jails and in prison are much more common than, let's say, or much more accepted than, I shouldn't say accepted, but allowed, or, things that happen behind the wall that, out here is like, yeah, if something like that would have happened, like you're automatically getting locked up or something like that. But in there, you're already locked up. So it's like, there's only so much that can be done to you. But when I worked in one of the facilities that I was at, there was an LGBTQ unit, and it only held about a little less than 20 people. And basically that was like one of the few units I knew that catered specifically to this specific, population. And of course, a lot of the other individuals that identify as being LGBTQ, they might be in general population or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And that obviously can open them up to certain risks, like, getting sexually abused or raped, or, just getting harassed and picked on and stuff like that. So, at the end, even just in the general population out here in the United States, like the LGBTQ community, has a, like the percentage of people from the LGBTQ community that end up committing suicide or, or whatever, like it's a higher number than in a lot of just regular cases of somebody that doesn't identify as LGBTQ. But, of course, behind the wall, there's a lot of other factors that come into play, and politics oftentimes is, is a big factor into all of that. But yeah, I definitely, I've heard of that case before, but I haven't delved into it. Is there any other cases like yesterday? There was something that came up that, I'm trying to kind of just pull it out of y'all to see if y'all paying attention to this news and stuff like that.
I heard what's up with that NYPD doing strike?
Yeah, so you have the president of the Captain's Endowment Association. He basically came out and he started talking about he basically started talking about the system CompStat. Y'all remember when I went over CompStat with y'all, right?
Right. They said they were gonna get rid of it, the NYPD, right?
Yeah, or at least that's what they're saying that they want to push for, because at the end, when we talk about racial profiling and things of that nature, like that's one of the tools that, historically speaking, has been used. And it's a very, give me one second. cameras around here, so I gotta try and be mindful. Basically what happened with the captain is that he came out and he started talking about the system CompStat. And basically the whole purpose of it was CompStat has been historically used to disenfranchise minority communities, especially during the eras of stop and frisk. So when stop and frisk was around, you basically had, you know, the over-policing of like communities of color. CompStat, it basically would track down how many arrests were made in a certain area, or, you know, how many of this number of crimes happened here or there or whatever. Point is that a lot of that information obviously is not all the way reported factually, because let's say if you made an arrest, right, for somebody having, quote unquote, had a weapon on them or something like that, and then there's video proof that shows up, oh, that person wasn't even there, or this and that, the case gets dismissed in court, but that record still stays in the CompStat system for NYPD. You know what I'm saying? So automatically you have a situation where, how do I put it? You have a situation where automatically people can discriminate against you or profile or over police a certain area because there's this perception that more crime happens there than in other places and stuff like that. So that automatically factors into how communities are policed. And then the fact that the president of the Captains Endowment Association came out and said that, so a top person in the NYPD, he came out and said that, you know, when there's been other police officers who actually came out, you know, years prior, like the NYPD 12, who, you know, is a coalition of police who are from the Black and Hispanic community, they came out and they said, yeah, there's quotas, there's, you know, unlawful arrests being made, you know, arrests just for the sake of having numbers and, you know, kind of just creating this image of like, yeah, we're creating a safe New York or whatever, but it's a safe New York at the expense of a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? Especially young people who, once you get a record on you or once you get an arrest record on you, that can change your whole life completely, you know what I'm saying? So he came out and he talked about that, and he basically represents like that whole union right there for captains. So the fact that he came out and he said that was pretty big right there. And then on top of that, you also have the killers of Ahmaud Arbery. They just got indicted yesterday. You know, and this happened like a day after Georgia had passed a hate crime law into effect, because of the fact that the killers of Ahmaud Arbery, they basically, you know, it as per it appeared through like court testimony and stuff like that, they apparently, you know, committed a race crime or a hate crime, you know, by referring to him as the N-word and stuff like that. But Georgia doesn't have, you know, policies or laws behind hate crime, which, you know what I'm saying, at the end of the day, whether the witness heard the guy saying the N-word or not, like that doesn't even play a factor into the case, which is obviously is unfortunate because the guy ended up losing his life over a hate crime, you know what I'm saying? But obviously they still was able to get him on the murder charges, and they had enough, you know, evidence with the video and stuff like that. But at least the addition of that hate crime component, like that's another thing you can tag onto somebody, you know, similar to how they do with people in the minority community. Like Meek Mill, we just talked about his situation. He got hit with 19 charges just so he can get locked up for one, you know what I'm saying? Just so he could get hit with probation for one charge. He got hit with 19 charges when he was a teenager. So it's like, you know, this is just something the system does, where it's like they try to peg you with as many charges as they can, and then, you know, they try to find you guilty for one of those. But yeah, they just indicted these individuals like a day right after the hate crime law went into effect, or was, you know, passed forward in regards to like putting it into effect at the very least. So that's just some interesting news that I saw and what have you. So without further ado, Today, as promised, we have a special guest. I've known this brother for a couple of years already. He's come into my other classes and he's spoken, and the students have, received him very highly, and they give nothing but praise after his presentations and after him sharing his background. You know what I'm saying? And he's just one of those dudes, man. Like when you chop it up with him, when you talk with him, like he keeps it all the way real. He keeps it official. You know what I'm saying? He's not really trying to like, you know what I'm saying? He's just gonna give you what you need. You know what I'm saying? So I want you to clap it up real quick for my boy Jay. Let's clap it up for him real quick. Let's go. Okay. And without further ado, here's my boy Jay. The mic is yours, bro.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to take a time to thank you guys for your time and for the platform and the opportunity to share some of my experiences. I hope that it comes as a blessing to some of you guys so that you'll be able to get a different perspective on, the everyday dealings of like the life inside of a correction officer. So I used to work, my name is Jamal Samide, and I used to work in Rikers Island. I worked in a facility called Otis Banton Correction Center. It was the facility that actually had what is known as the Bing, or the isolation, or the box, even though that doesn't exist any longer. And I worked there for approximately 10 years. I was hurt on the job, so I retired about 4 years ago. And, I worked in the main intake. So for those who may not understand the arrest process, so let's say someone is arrested, they arrest you in the street, they accuse you of a crime, and then you go before a district attorney. First, the cops, they go to the district attorney and they explain to the district attorney whether or not, there was a crime committed. And then once the district attorney makes that determination, they're presented before the judge, and that is called arraignment. And after arraignment, if the judge says you got bail and custody is transferred from the New York Police Department over to the Corrections Department, that's pretty much when you saw me. So I worked in a facility that pretty much housed new admission inmates, along with people who were what you call general population. We had adolescents that would come and they would have to be in the Bing, because our facility was for adults. Also, in our facility, we had just a different, a big crowd of people. And there are several facilities on Rikers Island that handle each borough's new admission inmates. So my facility, we handle Brooklyn and Staten Island, AMKC, which is Anna Cross Center. They would handle Queens and the Bronx. And then also the Tombs in Manhattan, also known as Manhattan House, they would take care of Manhattan, of the borough of Manhattan. And that's how the stuff was broken down as far as new admissions. The adolescents, they will end up in the adolescent jail, which is RNDC, Robert Darin Center. And then you have Rose M. Singer Center, which is the women's facility. They don't house men and women together. So I'm going to tell you that during my experience, I worked at the intake, and I worked there for approximately, like I said, about 10 years. And I can literally, there was about three or four buses that would come a day. You had like the 2 o'clock bus, the 6 o'clock, the 11, and the 2 a.m. bus. On each bus, there were approximately maybe 10, 20 inmates. So that's about 80 new admission inmates a day. And out of those 80, if you do the math, 80 times 7. Can anybody tell me what 80 times 7 is? Okay, it's 560.
560.
Mm-hmm.
So we had about 560 inmates that a week coming through there. Sometimes more, depending on the summer months, or depending on what time of the year it was. And if you add that times 52, you have approximately close to 30,000 inmates coming through the new admission in OBCC. And I worked there about 10 years. So you could take 30,000, and you could time it times 10. So I saw about approximately 300,000 inmates come through Rikers Island, new admission inmates. And I can tell you that I can count in my hand how many were Caucasians. So this is a number that I actually got to see and witness, not something that I read, by Sean King on Instagram or my song speaking about it on Hot 97. This is stuff that I saw personally. And a lot of these young men who were incarcerated, they were incarcerated for charges that really didn't make sense, like stuff like hopping the train, like little simple stuff. For example, Khalid Browner, he was actually in my facility. He was in when they had him in the solitary confinement. That's where he was, what is known as CPSU. And I never dealt with the guy, but I just want to give you an example. I've seen this so many times where people come through with $500 bail. Like I believe somebody mentioned the story about the transgender person who died in custody on Rikers Island. So I was reading an article as you guys were talking. It said that she died from an epilepsy or something. She had an attack, but her bail was $500. You know that it only takes 10% of $500 to bail someone out, which is $50. So there are a lot of people sitting in jail that could be home with only $50. And when they sit there, it's unfortunate, but there's a classification system. So when you're in there, you're going to be housed depending on your crime and depending on that type of stuff. So you can have somebody in there for a minor crime, but have to go to the mess hall or probably have to go to the law library with people who are accused of more severe crimes. And also we have to realize that Rikers Island is a jail, it's not a prison. And the difference is that those people, they have every right that we have because they're accused of a crime. They're not convicted of a crime. Are you guys with me? So when you see this type of stuff and you see it firsthand, like, I personally, I feel responsible for, going out there and telling people of the Black and brown community the truth about how we're being policed and how we're being targeted, because there will be guys there for smoking weed. But if you can go by NYU, and I know my brother Jonathan went to school at NYU, and these guys are literally over there by Washington Square Park, smoking weed and being like hippies out there, and no one does anything to them. But in a community, let's say like in Flatbush or East New York and Brooklyn, you come to Rikers Island for smoking a blunt, which I believe is terrible, because once you're there, anything can happen. Our job is care, custody, and control. But anything can happen because you're in a cell. Like, you can get into a fight, you can get robbed, you can get mugged. I've seen a lot of stuff happen. So I just wanted to give you guys some background because I'm very interested in really truly hearing, like doing like a Q&A to hear what you guys think about Rikers Island, and whatever ideas you may have or stuff that you may have read, and hopefully we can get to some clarity. I would tell you right now, we're all adults. I respect everyone's views and opinions. And, I understand that, police brutality and a lot of the stuff that's going on, is really bringing all this to the forefront. So, if you feel upset, and, I totally get it. Trust me, you're not going to offend me. I had worse things happen to me. But if you guys have any questions as far as Rikers Island, we can go ahead and get into it. And then eventually I'll tell you guys my motivation after we're done with this Q&A portion as to why I came on the job and why I recommend other people, especially people of color, to come on the job, whether it's NYPD or corrections.
At Rikers, is solitary confinement like the first place prisoners go? Like if there's a fight or something like that, right? Is that the first punishment that's on the list, or is there a process before it gets to solitary?
So, they don't have this anymore. They did away with solitary confinement, but it was actually used as a tool to try to get people to behave the same way jails are used as deterrents. Like, you do a crime, you do the time, like, those type of slogans. So it's the same type of thing. It's a deterrent to try to keep control, because if you don't have those type of tools, there's no consequences for the actions. Now, in regard to your question, when someone had a fight, they go through a due process, the same way you would go through a due process if you're accused of a crime in, let's say, in New York City or in any place. You have to go through what is called a due process. So they had the opportunity to speak with an adjudication captain who will go ahead and give them the opportunity to present their case. They come with witnesses. They'll say whether or not, they'll just basically state their case. They get an opportunity to do that. And then upon the findings will determine whether or not they will end up on in solitary confinement.
Okay, that seems fair.
Also, I just want to share something because I want to share something about the transgender community. So in the transgender community, because I see you guys brought that up, I'm not sure how the policies work now. I could talk about when I was there about 4 or 5 years ago, what the policies were. And there's the truth. We cannot determine a person's sexuality, like whether they're a male or a female. That has to be determined by a physician. A doctor has to examine that, that genital area and find out whether, like sometimes these people, they go through the process where they may not have testicles, but they still have a penis, so they still considered a man, or they'll have a penis, or they don't have a penis, but they still have testicles. They're still considered being a man. That's how they do it. Like that's not on us. That's totally on the medical department. And with those type of individuals, from my experience, it's almost better to put them in what is not as called solitary confinement, what is called, protective custody, where you separate them and you put them in a place where they'll be actually more safer and free from being sexually abused, which happens a lot in jail, believe it or not. Is there anything else you guys want to ask concerning those type of things?
So the protective custody, right? Like, could you describe that area? Like what is it like? A cell, or is it a big room, or like describe it?
So I didn't work in protective custody. I've dropped off inmates at protective custody, so I don't know. Like I've never seen the inside of it. So if I say anything, I'm probably lying or misinforming you. But I understand. To my understanding, it is a housing unit that houses the inmates that who are protective custody, and it gives them the opportunity. It's not like solitary confinement. They could come out their cells. They can interact with other inmates. Also, protective custody is also done for people who have like heinous crimes or crimes like, that are very on the news. Like, let's say, for instance, the gentleman that they got the show on Netflix, Jesus, I forgot his name. He was on Rikers Island. And when he was on Rikers Island, or like, let's say Lil Wayne, perfect example, when he was on Rikers Island, they put him in protective custody because of his notoriety. And because of his notoriety, it could be dangerous. Like there's guys who want to, gain points like, hey, let's say I'm the one who beat up Lil Wayne, or I'm the one who cut Lil Wayne. Like that type of stuff validates people inside of jail. It's a different culture. So that's why protective custody is offered to inmates, who fit the qualifications and the requirements. Anything else? I want you guys to get real, man. Ask me about what you want to ask me. Ask me about abuse. Ask me about whatever you want. I'm here to speak.
Hey, so like, how many deaths have you seen over there, like in a day, in a week?
Like deaths?
Yeah.
I seen in my 10 years probably about two people die. Like death is not a regular occurrence. That doesn't happen with regularity or with a lot of
mostly fighting and
the fighting. Yeah. So let me explain something about jail culture, because a lot of times we look at it with the perspective of with the logic that we may have, right? And the truth is, in jail, it's its own society. Like literally, it's its own. Jonathan, Professor Jonathan Cabrera can actually speak about that. But it's its own society. Like the rules that apply in prison, I mean in jail, do not apply here. Like let me give you an example of something, and I don't really want to go there, but I really want you to just try to understand the mindset of the inmates. Like one day I responded to an alarm because I was part of what is called the probe team. Being working in the intake, I was also part of the probe team. So when you see the guys with the suits and the hats and the batons, I was one of those people who was suit up and respond to an alarm, wherever it was at in the facility. So I remember one time I responded, and this young man, I don't know, he probably was like 18, 19 years old. Like he has this gash in his face. Like they cut him in the face. Like literally, he had a cut like from your hairline up here, like all the way to his chin. So, he's bleeding, and I told him to just hold it and put pressure. So I'm taking him downstairs to secure him and get him seen by a doctor. And when I take him down, it happens to be what is called court returns, like around 6, 7, 8 o'clock. Everybody who went to court in the morning is starting to return, and they're sending them back to their housing areas. And so when he gets there, his friends, they see him and they're like, "Oh my, my bro, what up, blood? What happened?" So, he showed them. And they was like, "Oh my God, that looks so good. That's amazing. I can't wait to get mine." Like that is an idea, the type of culture that's in there. And then the young man was like, "I know it wasn't for me, but I wasn't gonna let them cut my bro. So I said, cut me instead." And it's just that type of stuff that makes no sense to us, makes sense to them. It's an insane culture. Do you understand?
Hi.
Yeah, what's up?
So how would you like describe their education level? Like if you can, like, do you talk to them, or like how much communication do you have with an inmate or with a person? Yeah.
So I spoke with a lot of inmates. I have, obviously you there with them, you housed with them. I spoke with them. That I've seen very bright people in prison, people who I believe that they were given the right opportunities. There were some very bright minds, and then I've seen a lot of a lot of people who were very poorly educated at the same time. Like there was a lot of people who were illiterate. There was a lot of people who had like mental health issues that I don't believe that they should have been on Rikers Island. They should probably be on a hospital. But I never really, when we go on ahead and we processing the inmates, we don't truly look at their educational background. There's not a question in the paperwork that says, like if you're filling out an application per se, they'll ask you, what's your highest level of education? That type of stuff doesn't happen there. So we don't ask that question. So I really, it's very vague. Like I've seen people who were just, you could tell that probably, they probably had a tough time learning, or maybe had a learning disability. And then I've seen people who were just like extremely bright, like that. I couldn't believe that those men were locked up. Like, I'm like, yo, this guy should be somewhere, writing legislation or something, but that's just the way it works.
Okay.
So continue to tell us more of like just like what your experience was, like how you got into working in the Department of Corrections. Like, how was it for you prior to that, like just growing up in life in general, that, at some point you said, I think I want to make the decision to get into this field. And then of course, like once you got into the field, like, I guess what were some of the protocols you had to learn? What was, some of the cultural things that, how do I say it, whether it's said or unsaid, written or unwritten culture that you had to learn, and, basically like how has all that surmised as to where you're at right now currently in life?
So I decided to get into law enforcement, I want to say around 2006. I was in my late 20s, and I grew up in a tough neighborhood. I grew up in the Bronx, New York. Grew up in I'm Puerto Rican, and I grew up in what would be like unfortunately a typical Puerto Rican household for the Bronx, New York, where I lived, which was like a single parent household. And it was very rough. Like I seen a lot of my friends get murdered. I seen people go to jail, been shot at, you name it. Like I've seen it. I'm from the hood. So I saw like a couple of my friends, take the law enforcement route, and I had went to school out in Minnesota. And when I had returned, I saw like this I saw this new structure of society, like, you know, the suburban society where everybody was different. Like, you know, the things that we celebrated in the hood, they would look at it like you were behind. Like, let's say, for instance, you'd be like, oh, but I got out of high school. And they'll be like, well, everyone gets out of high school. And then, you know, over there was a whole different structure. Like everybody at the age of 21, the majority of people over there, they had their bachelor's degrees at 21, and they were like, you know, contributing to society. And it was like a whole different thing where, you know, in the hood, we celebrate, oh, you know, I got my license at 20 or 21. And they're like, yo, we got our license at 16. Like little things like that really started to make me realize that we were celebrating the wrong things in the hood, and that we were not being guided the way that America was being guided. I dated a white woman, a white girl at that time, and her dad, he kind of like adopted me, and he was like giving me all this information. I don't know if you read the book, but before Rich Dad Poor Dad, like it just gives you like two different perspectives. Like to see a perspective of a Midwestern man with those principles, it really helped me like understand and look at things differently. So when I returned home, like with this ambition to be able to go out there and set an example. So I remember I was working as a doorman. I had a really good job. I was working on 60th and Park. The building I worked in was like all millionaires. And like they weren't even millionaires. They were just like wealthy. Like they had like $1 million paintings on their wall. And to see that in society and see like where I come from, like it allowed me to have like all this experience that I felt like I wanted to share. So I had a few friends of mine trying to get me to go into PD and into corrections or Port Authority. So you know what? I was meditating on it. Meditation is very important. I was meditating on it. I was in the park. I saw this thing from a quote from Gandhi, and it said, be the change you want to see in the world. So that's why I truly decided to go into law enforcement, because I felt like I want to police my community. Like I want to be able to deal with my community because I know what they go through. I know their struggles. I know that, the culture. Whereas somebody who's not from these type of communities, they really don't understand our culture. They'll see somebody in a hoodie and they'll think it's threatening, and we know the difference between a dude in a hood and a dude in the hood. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but somehow in the hood you could differentiate. So I spoke to my family. At that time, I didn't have a girlfriend, so I spoke with my mom, and I told her, like I was gonna get into law enforcement, and my mom knows, like, pretty much when I make a decision, I'm just gonna follow through with it. So she told me, like not to get into PD, because she was like, that in PD, there's too many variables. You don't know who you stopping in the street or anything like that, and you can get hurt. And then she was like, just go to corrections. At corrections, you can pretty much hold your own. You know what you're dealing with. The population. And that's pretty much, how the story went. I wanted to then get into corrections for the sake of like trying to make a difference. And I do remember the first day I went to the academy, I'm dressed in my cadet suit. And like when I walked out, it looked like a Rocky movie. Like everybody was like clapping, like, oh yes, go ahead, get it. And I helped inspire a few of my friends to get into law enforcement and to try to be that difference. And once I was there, it was like getting hit with like a wall, because I really truly went there, to let these dudes know, like, not that I have sympathy, but I have empathy for you. Like I understand your situation. I got family members who died in prison. I got, family members who've been in jail. Got friends and family doing time. So like, I'm not the person who's gonna come here to abuse you or mistreat you. But I had to understand that these people, they had something against me, not me personally, but what I was wearing. And it was the uniform and what it represented. So that was kind of very hard in the beginning, like to understand that there was a line that you're an officer and we're inmates. So I'm here thinking that I could go in there, share some of the knowledge, information that I have, and hopefully help somebody get their life together, or just give them a different perspective. A man is, best thing you can give a man is ideas. So I wanted to give people just different perspective, a different mindset. But it was very tough. It was tough running into this thing where everybody was like against the uniform. Like, if I don't talk to you, you're the police. You're the police. And then I had people in my neighborhood start treating me that way. And it was weird at first, but then I understood, I made this choice to become a officer. And, I don't regret it. It paid very well. There's a few jobs that after 5 years, you're going to make $100,000 with minimum experience. So, I really don't regret it. But it was eye opening. And then eventually, when you're there, you kind of start falling into the culture, into like police culture. Like, yo, you're an inmate, I'm an officer, you know. So, and then eventually there was like a divide, and there was like these lines that I had to draw, because otherwise I would go home and it would be too personal. Like, I remember, I'm gonna give you an example. One day I was working in the solitary confinement, and man, that place was a mess. Like, when I mean a mess, like the inmates were flooding their cells. There was water coming down the tiers. It was like a mess. I'm being cursed at. They throwing feces, urine. Like, this place is just something I can't really describe. You just have to live it to see it and understand it. And I remember I was very stressed, and I was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna quit, because you know these guys, they were like very disrespectful. I never had nobody like curse at me and speak to me this way in my entire life. And here I am, subjected to this type of stuff on a regular basis. Not even me. Like I said, it wasn't personal. Like, I had to understand that later they were mad at my uniform. They were mad at what it represented. So they would take it out on me. You know, so I remember one day I was just going through it. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this, man. I'm going to quit this job. I'll go back to be a doorman. I don't need this stuff. You know, and I had a senior officer sit with me. He was like, listen, you know, don't do it. Remember what you came here. The end goal was the pension. The end goal was the 6 figures. The end goal was that. This is just part of it. Like, this is not personal. They don't have nothing against you. You'll see these guys in the street. They're not doing nothing to you. They'll more than likely just say what's up. And that's truly what happened. Like, every time I run into an inmate, like, it's never like no beef, like on site, none of that. You know, like, they'll see me, hey, what's up, S? And, you know, I'll say hi. Sometimes I don't remember them, because like I said, I've dealt with so many thousands of people that I don't remember everyone. But, you know, I had to understand that it wasn't personal. So, you know, anybody here who's probably studying to go into law enforcement, especially in the time and the climate that we're in, please understand a lot of people are upset. But it's not personal. It's not against you. And that's what I had to learn. That was the toughest thing to learn. Like, how to just separate myself. Like, it wasn't an attack on who I was. It's not an attack on my values. It's not an attack on my credibility from the hood. None of that. It was just they had something against the uniform, and that was it.
So in like understanding this culture and like, of course, being exposed to it from being behind the wall and then seeing how things are like out here in the community, like how has that shaped, I guess, like your perspective on like, you know, where the criminal justice system is going towards? Like, do you think that the criminal justice system is taking the right steps, you know, to correct some of the quote unquote behavior that people are being offended by, or do you believe that it's going to continue to happen? Because we know, as we spoke about on a one-on-one tip, like, crime has been around since the beginning of time. So it's like there could only be so much compromising at some point, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, if somebody's out to do a harm to somebody, that's just their prerogative. But in regards to like, you know, at least providing certain protections for citizens, like how you were saying, there's certain people, you know, from the hood that end up getting locked up for doing the same offense that somebody in downtown gets locked up for. Like, do you feel like, you know, policy is starting to be starting to be reworked in ways that can now kind of protect minority communities a little more, or like, do you think that the pattern is going to continue?
Well, I want to answer that question in two folds. And like I said, this is just my position. You know, I grew up in the hood. Like, I'm from the hood, bro. You know what I mean? So I've seen it. The reason people are intimidated, like say, if you put a uniform on, like, no one knows what it feels like to put a uniform unless you put it on. So it's very easy to have a perspective from like your couch or from a social media platform, than versus putting on that uniform. Because once you put on that uniform, like, you're automatically like the target. You're the po-po, you the police 12, all of that. You understand where I'm coming from? So I want to share this, you know, and I was talking to you about this yesterday, about like, just basic human instinct is the fight or flight reaction. And they both have the same objective, the preservation of life. So if I'm working in a neighborhood, like, I'll give you an example. You know, I live in Bloomfield, New Jersey, bro. Like, I don't even lock my doors. Like this, like, you understand, like, this neighborhood is totally different. You know, so the heightenedness of my awareness of the stress is going to be lower if I was a cop patrolling this type of neighborhood versus a cop patrolling South Newark or Irvington, because these neighborhoods are historically violent. So if you're walking into a place with violence, right? And this is where I want, like we have to really remove like the emotions and just speak, let's call the hood what it is. Like in my hood, I don't know how many fights I've seen. I don't know how many homicides I see. So I see so many people get killed. I can't count. I can't even name them off the top of my head. So if you coming to that place, you're going to be on high alert. You know what I'm saying? So obviously the training that they give you, right? They tell you that there's different, it's the same way like when there's a terrorist threat, right? There's like a yellow alert, orange, red, you know what I mean? So it's the same type of mindset like that in the training. That's what they give you. They tell you, hey, you always have to be like in yellow, like just be prepared, be mindful of the environment that you're in. But I can speak from my own personal experience. Like if I went to a housing area that was considered a good housing area, let's say like 2 lower or 2 upper in OBCC, that is a housing area, low classification inmates. These guys to follow instructions. They do what they're supposed to do. And the key word is they follow instruction. They do what they're supposed to do. They stay within the rules of the facility. Well, those days are easy. Like you just showing up there, hanging out with these guys. That's pretty much all you're doing. And you're watching movies with them, watching TV with them, whatever, watching them play spades, dominoes, because they're doing life in there. Like I don't mean that they're doing life in prison, but I mean like they live there, So, but then if you told me, hey Jay, Officer Semi-Day, go over to the annex, like go over there to 1 North, to 1 West, where these guys are slashing and stabbing each other, and it's crazy. Like I'm gonna feel different walking into 1 North than I would walking into 2 Lower. Does that make sense? So in a lot of times, believe it or not, unfortunately, the hood has gotten a bad rap on its own because there's a lot of the stuff that we do. No one else does. I never seen a white man do graffiti in my neighborhood. No white man ever killed none of my friends. My friends, they killed each other. Like we all did this to one another. So when these people who don't know these neighborhoods come there and they have to deal with this type of environment, you're talking about a stress level that's very high. And I'm not justifying any police brutality. I'm not for police brutality. I'm for education. I'm for training. I'm for reformation. So I'm just letting you know my position. I don't want people to think that I'm pro, police abusing people. Abuse is abuse on any platform, whether it's the police abusing their neighborhood or whether it's the neighborhood gangs or whatever abusing their own neighborhood that they grow up in. So the point I'm trying to make, there was I'm gonna give you an example. There was a check cashing place about 2 blocks from my house. People didn't want to cash their check there. You know why? Because they were being robbed. By who? By the same people who live there. So guess what? You think that the cops know these things. They know that there's armed robbery. Armed robbery leads to homicide. Homicide is the #1 homicide that there is. So what do you think happens if I'm a cop and I'm being told to go here in an area that has a history like that? Of course, my senses are going to be heightened. Maybe I'm going to make a poor judgment, and I'm not justifying nobody doing that type of stuff that we've seen on the news. That stuff is just disgusting. But I am telling you that until you're in that situation and it's you would have to see. Now, I believe it starts with education. It starts with educating the hood on how to deal with police. And it starts with educating the police on how to deal with the hood. Because we're being told the wrong things. We're being told things like, hey, tell the cops this, do the cops this. It's funny that's what we tell each other. Oh, do this and do that. But when in my training, when I was in the academy as a Hispanic male and as a African Americans that were there, because the department is predominantly minorities, we were told that when we get pulled over, comply. If they ask you for your ID, give it to them. Don't argue. Don't say that. Just give them the ID. That's how they trained us. And maybe you can look at it like some Uncle Tom or whatever. But here's the truth: I have something greater than a PBA card. I have an ID that says retired officer on it. But you know what the police see when they see me? They see a Hispanic man, a brown man. They don't know my background. So I have to get to my wallet. And hopefully I could get to my wallet and show them my credentials before something happens. Like when you get pulled over, do however you want to do it. I'm going to tell you what they trained us to do. Turn off the car, turn all the lights on, try to look as unimposing as possible. roll all the windows down, and then, just whatever the cops say, he wants your license and ID, give it to them. I'm going to tell you, I've been in situations where I had cops pull me over. I was a young man. I drove a BMW. I had a 5 Series. I was in the hood. So you already know they was pulling me over on a regular basis. I had guns drawn on me, all of this stuff, because they probably thought I was a drug dealer, probably thought I was armed. I don't know. Maybe I fit a profile. But I'm going to tell you this. Every single time I did exactly what I was trained to do. And every time I just came home like nothing. Like we were told, hey, have both hands on the steering wheel. This ain't the time. I'm gonna be real. You already agitating in a situation that's already tense, especially now. Like I couldn't imagine being a cop right now. Like everyone is an activist, and everyone feels that they can disrespect you. This stuff is tough, man. And I'm not saying everyone. That's a big word. Like a lot of people, they feel like this, and so you're talking about a place that's creating a lot of stress. I got a lot of friends in PD that they're just stressed out, because they're like, yo, it's so hard. Like, everybody thinks they know something. Everybody, yo, listen, just comply. But I guess, we're not in those days where, you give up your life. They're asking you for your license. A person in a uniform and an authority is asking you for your license. And it's like, no, I don't have to. I don't have to do this. Here's the truth. If you're being pulled over for an infraction, it's probably in your best interest to just comply. I'm telling you what I do. I comply. I tell all my friends to comply, because I know how it can get. And I know how police write. Like, they're going to write their story. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to just leave it there. You can figure it out from there, what I mean. There's a reason the convictions are low. They're going to write their story about what happened.
That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
Oh, you got something to say, Mel?
No, I was saying that, yeah, it's a lot. Like we were talking about, like I feel that I do agree with you about the education part. Like that's just like number one thing. And like I feel like everyone has to like educate themselves in every perspective. So like this to me just like, I guess like gives me hope, because it's like if people like you who's been in that industry could speak the way you speak, then like it doesn't I guess make me like that scared to go into the system. But at the same time it does, like you said, this time is very like very tense. So if you're like me, if I was smart enough, I'll be like, nah, I don't want to go. To keep it real, like, nope. But like I respect that you say you go into it to be the change you want to be, but I feel like that's very hard. It's very hard. I don't know.
Well, I mean, something that to take into consideration that we've also spoken about in other courses is, of course, criminal justice is a very broad field. Like of course, being a police officer is definitely a way, or any kind of officer is definitely one of the ways that you can be at the forefront, at the front lines, and really create change from an immediate standpoint. And then you also got the angles of maybe getting into writing policy, or doing litigation and things of that nature. Like there's so many angles and routes that you could come to it from, because all of it is needed anyways. You know what I'm saying? You got the police. Like these are the main stages of criminal justice. It starts off with police, then you got the court system, and then you got corrections. So those are usually the three main tiers and levels, and people are needed in every one of those, because they all affect, which at the end of the day is the bottom line, which is, okay, if somebody gets arrested and then they get incarcerated, the point is most people that get locked up are going to come back to the community. The majority, unless you're a lifer, you're going to come back to the community, And so the main thing is how effective, or how conducive will you be to the community when you come back? Or you just going to continue to fall back into the same cycle, or you're going to, go back to doing the same thing and depriving other people of their humanity. And so all of it goes hand in hand, going back to the point that Jay was saying about education, that is important. It's important on both sides because, for example, just this past week in Chicago, you had over 100 shootings, and you know what I'm saying, like I'm pretty sure we could confidently say that didn't involve white folk or the police or anything like that. That was something that just, you know what I'm saying, it's just one of those things. It's summertime. Summertime oftentimes brings that kind of activity, and Chicago already has been known as, the alley is Chirac for a reason. You know what I'm saying? Although, of course, like we've spoken about in other classes, like when we think about criminal justice, we have to touch on a broad spectrum of things like socioeconomics, educational upbringings, the parental system, all of these things that have been institutionally and structurally placed from before our existence. You know what I'm saying? Resources allocated to the community, of color, like how often does that happen? Like all these things, of course, eventually lead to, a lot of the issues that we experience even amongst our own communities. But at the end of the day, people still have the ability to think and rationalize for themselves. And so, obviously there still has to be that responsibility nonetheless. But all of it to say that education definitely is a key component. Understanding as much as you can, grasping as much as you can, because ultimately when you get into the field of criminal justice, like you're gonna have to be kind of like a jack of all trades in a sense. You know what I'm saying? You got to be able to meet people at different stages and different places of life. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the officers, may not necessarily have the how do I say, like that social work kind of, I guess communication where it's like, yeah, I'm an officer, but then at the same time, I can be sociable. I can kind of de-escalate and talk down the situation. Like that's something that, of course, people are talking about even more now. But, if more of that was to be put into effect, it would make, the community relations better. But overall, of course, it's definitely a hard time in general. Like regardless of anything and everything has kind of just gotten out of whack because you have issues that have been persisting for too long and, barriers in communication that haven't been able to been, met in the middle and what have you. So I want to open up the conversation a little more. I want y'all to kind of think about some real deep or personal questions, whether it's for yourself or, for Jay that you would like to ask, because this is the opportunity to basically just, dive in and see if, what I'm saying, if you still want to continue the route that you're going, if you want to, think about different options. Like, I want y'all to come out and just be upfront about it because, what I'm saying, I'm not sure how often you're going to have the opportunity to speak to an officer or somebody who's been in the field in class, but there's definitely a chance right now. So just go for it.
Hi, Jay. Oh, so I just wanted to say, like, I agree 100%. I grew up in the hood or whatever. And, like, even to this day, I myself, like, I get in my car, the first thing I do is lock my doors. You know what I'm saying? I go out at nighttime. I make sure I walk with my key in my knuckle. So I get that mentality, a cop patrolling a certain type of neighborhood, being on high alert, guards up, whatever the case may be. But something I'm noticing a lot too is like they put a lot of rookies in these type of neighborhoods. And I feel like, of course, they don't have much experience. Why do they throw rookies a lot of times in these type of neighborhoods? I don't see how like that's gonna help the problem.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Ms. Brown. And I appreciate that. First of all, as far as like the rookies, I could just sum it up to one word: seniority. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, when you have more time on the job, you're going to try to get a better post. You're going to, like any job, you're going to try to make it as easy as possible. Understand these people out there making a living. Like the same way, you know, you make up and go to your 9 to 5, that's what they're doing. They going home to you know, going to work. And most of the time you just want to go to work and mind your business. I'm being honest with you. I did it for years. I just wanted to mind my business. Like if they told me, hey, I'll ask the captain, hey, is there overtime? And the captain told me, yeah, you know, you could do the KK. The KK is the officer's kitchen. So I get to sit in the officer's kitchen all day, you know, like make sure it's good, make sure the inmates are putting the food that is fresh and watch TV. I'm gonna take that post versus them telling me, hey, go to 1 West or 1 North. There's high classification where there's slashing and stabbings. So that's really what it comes down to, the crappy post. I mean, I hate to say that, then that sounded terrible, but it's just a fact.
It is what it is. That's real.
The bad posts are gonna go to rookies because ain't nobody trying to do that. Like, you know, and that's why you're a rookie, you work through that, you gain that experience, you gain that knowledge. But I do believe that maybe they should send people who are like, maybe if you are going to send a rookie officer to that type of environment, you should definitely have a seasoned person with him. You understand? Because sometimes I realize that, and this is just personal experience, you know, I've seen that there's some people are just overzealous. Like they want to be, you know, they want to be a cop. I want to be, listen, this job, you're dealing with trouble. Like you don't have to go look for it, it's gonna come. Like just chill. Like, you know, I used to go to work, try to have the easiest day as possible. I'm just being honest. I've been in hundreds of uses of force. I testified, I had charges against me. I've been investigated by the feds. I've had every possible thing that can happen to an officer happen to me. So I'm telling you, like, if you're gonna be in law enforcement, don't go in there with a hero. It's too much crime. You're not gonna fix New York City by yourself. You know what I'm saying? Take things one day at a time. Understand that today's going to be different than tomorrow. And it's like Ms. Brown said, you know, just get prepared unless you have a hook. And I hate to say this, and like racism, it isn't just socially. There's racism within the department. Like if I saw a white officer come to OVCC, like OVCC was a terrible facility at the time that I was there, had a terrible reputation. Like when I got told I was going to that and that was going to be my parent command, like I thought about quitting the job. Like that's how bad that place was. I was like, yo, I don't know if I'm gonna do this. Like this place is insane. But all the Caucasians I saw go there, I already knew like after a few weeks, they were gone. Because it's like, let's say a chief or somebody will walk who was another Caucasian, and guess what? People take care of themselves. Like they go out there and they'll see him, and for you know that guy's driving, now he's a chauffeur or he's in a K9 unit or he's in a place where has minimal inmate contact, and that's just them taking care of them. And the same way that they take care of themselves is the same way we should take care of us. We should be the cops, we should be the captains, the lawyers, the district attorney. We need to be in those positions so that we can make those decisions and we can go ahead and extend those hands.
I agree. I definitely didn't think of it that way. Thank you. And Mel, to like kind of piggyback off what you said, like change could start with you, because I think you said you wanted to be a cop. I just saw a video. I don't know if everybody saw this video. A neighbor, I forgot the neighborhood, but a neighbor in some neighborhood called the cops on a bunch of kids playing football in the street. And she recorded that when the cops got there, the cops started playing football with the kids. Like, that's fire.
As they should.
Right? You know, like, so things like that can really just change the world, seriously.
Did you guys ever heard of the Police Athletic League? I don't sure if they got funds for that anymore, but like I grew up when the police were part of the community. Like I knew every cop who patrolled my neighborhood. We used to play stickball with them, softball, baseball, flag football. They used to pick us up, put us in tournaments. Like the police before was really truly for the community. I'm not sure if that type of stuff doesn't get funded anymore.
I've definitely had that experience growing up too. I was like a tomboy, all my friends was guys, but I've had cops come buy us pizza once a week. Like I've had good relationships with cops growing up. And I also grew up where, you know, the Chinese people wouldn't come on my block because kids is beating them with bats and umbrellas, you know? So it's like, I get it. Like I really do. But obviously one thing don't have nothing to do with the other, and people should not be losing their lives.
I will say to you, to Ms. Brown, and say, like I said, any person who grew up in that type of environment, who you know, every young man I meet, you know, who probably has 60 college credits, I tell them go become a cop, because we need us there, and this is just the way it is. We need us there. Period. They don't know how to deal with us. They never dealt with us. They don't compromise.
That's
That's fire.
yeah, that's really hopeful. That's really great.
Like right now, for instance, I have my brother. He's waiting. He's on the waiting list. Like everybody I know, I want him to do it. Why? Because they have the experience. Because they know that need that we need. You know, so to do this job, you have to care about your community. You have to care about the people that you're dealing with. Check. You have to really care. Like you say, hey, I took this job because once you took this job, you cross the other line. So once you're on that other side, what you're gonna do with that power? What are you gonna do with that influence? Like this is why me personally, I go speak at the career days at you know I go out speak at career days. I go ahead and now I was talking to my brother Jonathan that I'm gonna be I'm working as an attendance counselor in Newark. I could have took a job anywhere, but I specifically targeted these neighborhoods and these people because they're being marginalized and they have what is called the lack of information, not just education, the lack of information. And I want to inform them. And I feel like if I can take my story, growing up in the hood, having all the experiences that I had working in jail, and can help a young man or a young woman cross that stage and see the value of education. I don't know why education is so undervalued in the hood. Like if you go to school like a square or a cornball, I don't really understand it. But like I really truly want to help them understand these principles and hopefully not influence them, but just inform them and let them make a decision, you know, that can change their life. Like everybody here has a responsibility to their sphere of influence to go out there and be a difference. And that's really what it comes down to. You know, we got to stop thinking about ourselves and start thinking about our communities. You know, the word that is inside community is unity, and that's what we lack. And that's why we need to go ahead and go out there and take care of each other. And when you see a black cop or you see a Hispanic cop, you don't know his background, you don't know his trajectory. Don't say he a sellout. Don't say those things. You don't know that. That's like if a black cop, they called you a criminal because of your color of your skin. You're basically doing the same thing. That's like a reverse bias or reverse stereotype.
Nah, I super agree with you. And that's why, like, for a long time, like, I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement, I guess, somehow. But, like, I started to realize I don't want to, you know, get to the point where I'm dealing with kids. I used to want to be a correction officer when they're in prison. You know, like, I want to get to them before that. So I've been locked up. I've been through the system and everything like that. And now I want to get to them, like I said before, you know, they're starting to do these crimes and they're going through certain things. So I started to realize, like, I want to be a mental health counselor. Like, you know, preferably with teenage girls. Because, you know, like a lot of my trouble and stuff came from, you know, boys and shit, like stuff like that. So, yeah, just trying to help them get their mind right and do, you know, the right things and not make the same mistakes that I've made growing up and not having, you know, guidance or people to look up to.
I agree, Ms. Brown. You know, I worked with a team of guys. There was about 6 of us that worked in the midnight. Another 6 or 7 guys who came in the morning. 8 guys who came in the morning, the 7 to 3 tour, and another set of 8 guys who worked on the 3 to 11. And we all agreed on the same thing, that we were tired of processing our people. You know how disheartening it is to process only black and brown people into this system? Like that stuff is hard. You know, so like we all wanted change. You know, this is why we go out there and we speak. If you want to be, you know, a mental health counselor for people who are for within your demographic, definitely do it. Definitely go out there and share. Maybe the experiences you had could be turned out to be a blessing for someone else. And maybe you may have the proper words, because it's one thing, you know, for somebody to say that they understand me, you know, like someone could tell you, hey, I know what you're going through. But it's another to say, hey, I've experienced it also. I also had similar experiences. I had police, you know, stop and frisk. You spoke about stop and frisk earlier. Man, like back in the day, stop and frisk was like, I was sick of the cops jumping out on me. And that kind of like fueled me. Like I was like, yo, I want to be a cop, because I ain't just going to be harassing people just to harass them. Like, you understand, you have to be that. You have to do it. You know, though, if you get that education, go for yours. You know, I don't know, you know, who's your school counselor, but tell them, you know, what your career path is and your career goal. Get that education. for those of you guys who got financial aid, man, I wish I had financial aid, because I wish, if I had financial aid, I'd go get a doctorate degree. So like, go get yours. If they're giving it to you, go get it, especially if it's free. Like, you don't want to, like me, I owe thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on education, and it was worth it because it helps you become enlightened. So if you're getting it for free, get it. Don't stop here first. I'm happy that all of you guys are in the school, but don't stop here. Get your bachelor's, get your master's, get whatever you get. We need you. We need people to get educated, and we need people in these positions. And sometimes in those positions, there's an educational requirement that is needed. So maybe you may have the ambition, you may have the know-how, the experience, and you may be coming from the right place, but if you don't have that educational piece, it's going to be very hard to get in.
I appreciate that, Jay.
You're welcome.
And like what we spoke about, like there's so many different ways to, bring food to the table. It doesn't have to always be in any one specific way. In reality, as long as your cause is righteous and, you're standing up, for the underrepresented and being a voice for the voiceless and all the cliches and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? It don't matter which side of things you put yourself in, as long as you're doing the work and you're doing it, for the betterment of the community. When I finished working at the Department of Corrections, like I was drained mentally, I was drained emotionally, and I was only there for a year, you know what I'm saying? But I also was going through a lot of other things on the side, like with personal, life stuff and all that stuff. So of course that added on to that, but, and I was trying to finish my master's program. So all of that took a lot out of me at the time. But one thing that I did leave from DOC understanding was just, kind of going back to what Jay was saying, like how tiring it is to see your own people continually, going in and out. Like when we spoke about the school to prison pipeline a couple of classes ago, it's like I gave you the example of how I never stepped foot into Rikers Island before I started working there. And for whatever reason, I felt like I was experiencing deja vu. I felt like I was in there at some point prior in my life. And after like a week of reflecting, like my first week of working there, I had to basically do some deep digging into myself. And I realized it reminded me of high school, you know what I'm saying? Because of the, institutionalization that one goes through and all that stuff. Even just the energy that a lot of the guys gave off. They reminded me of guys that I would hang out with or that I would chill with in school and stuff like that. So, one thing that I understood about it is because the system is structured in a way to keep, people of color oppressed, you know what I'm saying? Because the recidivism rate is over 60%. So it's a pretty high likelihood that somebody that comes out is probably going to go back in. I started focusing my attention once I was done with that on, community outreach or, community programs that, at least assist young people between like the window of like 17 to 24 to like, find gainful employment or go to school or something of that nature. Because to your point, Precious, the fact is that once the system puts its hands on you, and we have to go back to our conversation yesterday with Daoud. He was saying, like, the system, like, the only way that any of this works for you is if you will yourself to become a better version of yourself, because the criminal justice system by itself is not going to fix nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, it has to be willful participation on your side as somebody that's been incarcerated. And a lot of these individuals don't have, just that frame of mind to be, to think for themselves or to be leaders, in the community to say, yo, I gotta be more than this. I gotta, regardless of the situation, you know what I'm saying? So like, as a result of that, I said, let me go to the community. Let me get these young folk before they even touch the system. Because once you touch the system, the odds are it's going to continue to just suck you back in and suck you back in. And you know what I'm saying? So at the end, that was the approach that I took as well. You know what I'm saying? But at the end, if you choose to be on the side as well of like just focusing on the people that are currently in the system or in the courts or wherever, the point is that we do need people in all avenues of the criminal justice system, because like the system as a whole obviously has not, worked in the favor of, communities of color more, more so than not. So we got a couple of more minutes. I'm gonna open it up for some more questions or comments or anything that y'all want to ask or share. You know what I'm saying? Jay obviously has dropped some gems on y'all, and you know what I'm saying? I'm always just happy to have him around just to kind of share this information, because like I say, he comes from a straightforward perspective. He's not really gonna sugarcoat anything for you at all, really. And you know what I'm saying? All of this is coming from experience that he's gained over the years. So let's open it up for a couple of more questions, and then, you know what I'm saying, we can end it with that.
So sign me up. I don't know. I've been looking like for jobs basically in the correctional system, wherever. But like I feel like everything is delayed because of the virus. So my concern is like, damn, this is gonna take a while for me to, start working.
Did you take the test already?
Yeah, I took one test, the police exam.
Okay,
and
so if you wanna get on, PD corrections, you have to check out their website. Also check out DCAS. DCAS to let you know any open competitive test that's out there. There's a ton of tests sometimes the city had that we may not be aware of. So I would suggest that everybody who's trying to get into the workforce to periodically look on DCAS and see what positions are out there. And if you want to, just definitely take the test, get your list number, and then get prepared to go through the investigation. I'm going to be honest, this job was very rewarding and they compensate you well, but it does come with its price, and I don't want you to go in there unaware of the price. You know what I'm saying? So some of those price, my brother Jonathan spoke about, like, the mental stress, all of that, like you're going to have to be ready. You got to have a system in place. Like I had a system where like how I would decompress, and I would just allow all of that stress to come off of me before I go ahead and interact with people. Because if I came from work and I came straight home and whatever, like I was coming home tense. Ain't little thing I was talking to my family. They were it was just bad. So, when you get into this job, mentally get prepared, like for the stress, comes with a ton of stress.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned meditation. Meditation is important. And I feel like there should also be like, how they say defund the police, but there should also be like funding for like, mental health practices, stuff like that. Like I feel like you got to think about when they say defund the police, because a lot of things like you said, like community relations, like they have every year, well, not this year maybe, but they play soccer in my community. So I play soccer with police officers from the precinct. So I mean, that's cool. I wouldn't want that to go away,
I don't really know about the fact that they defund, but I do know that a lot of these agencies of the government, they're trying to personally make them private. They're trying to privatize, because this way that they could control, pensions and that type of stuff. So, just it's America and it's a capitalist country. So, you got to follow the dollar. Some of the times they might post something as one thing and the agenda is something totally different. So I would suggest you get educated, see what happened in Camden, New Jersey under Chris Christie. That he defunded the police, and he made it private, and he fired a bunch of people. Like, you gotta understand, sometimes this stuff is bigger than what you think it is. There's you got governors talking about how, the pensions, they breaking the infrastructure of like the financial, the positions of the states. So understand that some of this stuff maybe have a hidden agenda. It might be painted one way, but it's really something else. This is America. Y'all in college, do your homework. So I would say.
Yeah, that's a fact. All of it, you know, especially when it comes to politics and politicians, like they never mean it in a straightforward fashion, which is why, you know, especially with social media, because now we can basically dictate, or you know, we can dictate the news a lot better than in years past, where in the past we had to depend on just a number or limited social outlets or media outlets or whatever. The responsibility is to, as Jay was saying, get informed, know specifically, for example, the conversation on what defunding the police means, like what does that, you know, specify, you know, are you talking about defunding the whole police? Or are you talking about demilitarizing the police? Like what aspects of it are you talking about defunding? And then obviously once the defunding takes place, what is supposed to be done with the money? So, you know, the main thing is having those specifics set up or pat down so that way there's less confusion, you know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of like the conversation of Black Lives Matter in a sense. You know, when it first started coming out, and I can understand why people respond all lives matter, because it's like, bro, like not just Black Lives Matter, but the reason why Black Lives Matter became a term was because for so long, all other lives except Black lives have been mattering. So now this is like, it's like when somebody has a broken leg, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, you're saying, help, help, you know what I'm saying? And then somebody else who got both of their legs working is over here like, what you mean you need help? I need help too, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's not the same conversation, but, you know, of course, that's why the conversations have to be held in regards to like what these specifics are and things of that nature. If you're looking to, you know, to apply to, you know, to be an officer or whatnot, obviously, you know, you said you applied to PD, you would have to go on the DOC website and as well as DCAS and see what the listings are, apply there as well. You know what I'm saying? And one thing that we've spoken about as well in previous classes is if you apply for, you know, to be an officer, because usually the process takes a while, and especially now with the pandemic, they got things on pause and stuff like that. Think about, you know, furthering your education, getting that bachelor's degree, going for that master's, just as what Jay was saying. And, you know what I'm saying, at the very least, even if you don't get a call back, like you already continued, you know, keeping your foot on the pedal in regards to something. And obviously if they call back, then, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of just figure out, you know, what do you want to do moving forward, as opposed to if you didn't have a fallback plan. So definitely some good suggestions right there. Let's take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll end the class there. Anybody else? Come on, let's get at least like 1 or 2 more questions. I know y'all, I'm saying y'all be having questions about different things at different times, so I know y'all gotta at least have like 1 or 2 more. Let's get it. Anybody else thinking about being a correctional officer? Okay.
Okay. So, can't think of a good one. Ask me something.
Yeah, man, why do you want to be a correctionalist? What is your motivation behind it?
I want to, like you said, I want to be that change. You want to be like, because I know growing up in the hood, I know like how, you know, if you know the threat, like you said, you know when there's a threat, you know when there's not. So I want to be that person that doesn't harass, that I want to be that person that treats communities with respect, you know, and educate them, and probably, you know, just develop a relationship. But, you know, I don't want to be like, you know, because you hear stories about how like just corrupt it could be, and that's just scary to me, honestly. But if you said departments hire, like, well, you know, they're diverse, you know, that makes it like, I guess, easier on the mind that you have people like you?
I would tell you to do this, Melvin. I would
Mm,
say to you to Google how many, I don't know what your ethnicity is.
yeah.
Find out like how many of your people are in the department and see if you're underrepresented. Because a lot of times, if there's nobody there that looks like you, they don't know the needs of people from your community or from your place or from your background. That makes sense? So they'll go over a topic and they'll be insensitive. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm Puerto Rican, right? And my wife, she's Dominican, but I never knew the struggle of Dominicans as far as getting papers for the United States of America. 'Cause guess what? Being a Puerto Rican, it was signed into a law that we were citizens. I want to say it was signed sometimes in the 1900s, sometimes. But so we became citizens. So I never understood citizenship. You understand and how we deal with people like that. And then when I started dating my wife, I started to understand like the immigration. I started hearing different things and being enlightened. So guess what? If she doesn't tell me about that, I will go like that stuff doesn't even cross my mind. You understand? So this is why it's important to have our people there. You understand? Like I don't know what your culture is. I'm just telling you, like you want to have your representation. You want to be properly represented.
Yeah, I'm Mexican, by the way. But yeah, that's really good information. Like, I guess that does make sense to Google up your precinct. You know.
Like let me say, if you're Mexican American, right? So then
Yes.
probably stereotypes against Mexican American. There's probably police officers who treat Mexican Americans some type of way. Maybe there's a language barrier. Maybe there's other barriers. Maybe there's a barrier as far as like citizenship and residentship. Stuff that maybe firsthand or know family members or friends because it affects your community. That's what I'm trying to say. Like you have to be in there so that you can make changes to help your people. Does that make sense?
Yes,
And
definitely.
that's just across the board. Look up, you want to be a lawyer. I don't know how many people here want to be lawyers and doctors. Look up how many Puerto Rican doctors are there, how many Puerto Rican lawyers are there. So you can see. Those are the people who are really making the move. Those are the ones who are, lobbying and sitting in these meetings. I've started meetings with people who've never been inside of a prison, but yet they were making decisions that was going to affect everybody who works in the facility. And they could tell you when he was working at headquarters, that's how it is. You got people who never set foot in jail making a decision about jail, and that's scary. You know what I'm saying? So, you need to represent your people. That's what I would tell each and every one of you guys.
Right. Right.
So let's take one more question or one more comment, and then I'm saying we end it right there. All right, so I guess nobody has anything. So, Jay, any last words? Number one, we definitely appreciate you. Let's clap it up for Jay real quick. Let's do that. Let's do that right quick. Let's clap it up for Jay. Thanks so much for coming through, man. We definitely appreciate you, and obviously, I always appreciate your perspective and your input, especially coming into the classes and what have you. You have any last takeaways you want to give to the class?
I would just say, to just become more as well-rounded as possible. Like I tell every class that I go to, and I visit them, take up as much sociology as possible. If it's you have that as an elective, definitely take up sociology so you can understand some of the structures and the stuff that's in place, and definitely take up history, not only American history, take up world history, why certain things um, are the way they are. Because if you don't know your past, you don't know how we got here, and you don't know where we're heading. So that's what I would tell you guys. Take the time and do your homework. Become a life learner. Do your homework. That's really what I'd say. Because it'll give you a different perspective. You're not being taken by a tidal wave. Like you're gonna have people on social media. I realize has people running in herds. Like somebody will say something, everybody just runs with it without doing the proper education and the research. So I will tell you guys, this time that you're in college, I believe this class is called Rutgers, correct? Is this right? Because the rep is Jonathan?
Urban.
This is urban. What is it? It's
Community
criminal
policing.
justice in the urban community.
So then, like, dive into that topic. There's a ton of information out there. There's a ton of different perspectives, and try to get every perspective, because every perspective is going to give you a wider, broader view, and then you could be able to make a more educated stance on, however you may feel. Whether you can be pro something or against something, you know why versus your emotion. That's what I'll say. That's my last piece of wisdom. Study.
So continue to grow, continue to learn, and you know what I'm saying, just continue to stay motivated. And with that, we're gonna end the class. Y'all already know the vibes, man. We're gonna do this on the count of 3. We're gonna piece it out. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on. Nah. We gotta do that again. Let's do this on the count of 3. 1. Don't be shocked because Jay's here. I know some of y'all like, oh, Jay can leave. Nah. We gonna do this on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. All right, yeah. Yo, Jay, thanks so much for coming through, brother. And yo, everybody else, enjoy your weekend, and I'm gonna catch y'all on Monday. And remember, next week is presentations, final paper. You know what I'm saying? If y'all got any questions, obviously you can reach out or whatever.
Okay, Professor.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Professor.
Later.
Thank you.
Stay up.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Professor.
No.
Later.
Yeah.